We're going to switch gears here in this lesson and move off of the science and move into more of the operational history of World War II. I think it's fundamental to understand how the war progressed, to understand a lot of the decision making that went into the bomb decision and how to use it, why to use it, when to use it, etc. So we're going to look at Europe to start with, and a picture of a bombing raid there. Going to look at the air power aspects, but you need to have a fundamental understanding of the essence of the entire war. So we'll look at Europe to begin with. When did World War II start? Interesting question. You can ask a lot of academicians about this and probably get a number of different answers. One consensus among a lot of people is that World War II really started right after World War I, and that's in December in 1919 with the signing of the Treaty of Peace that's shown here at the conference at Versailles. The terms of this were quite onerous in regards to the losing power, namely Germany, war reparations and whatnot, and became a very, very big cause of the next major event that occurs in Germany after the Weimar Republic, and that's the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. In 1933, after a lot of aborted starts on Hitler's part, he is elected Chancellor of Germany. Wow, here we've got a guy who becomes a symbol of the new Germany, the power of the grand old country. And immediately, one of the things he does is abrogate a lot of the terms of the Versailles and another treaty, Locarno Treaty, that had come along. It creates the Luftwaffe, the air arm of the Germans in 1934, basically announces it to the world the next year, so Hitler is moving quickly. An interesting thing about Adolf Hitler that I've often thought about is here is a man who wrote a book, Mein Kampf. Hopefully many of you have at least looked at it, certainly have heard of it. But this book essentially laid out the Hitlerian view of the world. I mean, we are already looking at the hatred of the Weimar Republic, and for that matter, almost anything that's democratic bent. The concept of Lebensraum. The German people need expansion to move out, to be great. His anti-communist, anti-Jewish beliefs. It's all laid out there in the 1920s, and I think if many people had taken the time to read the book, a lot of what occurred in the 1930s and 40s would not have been much of a surprise. Now, for the rest of this talk, I'm going to use this one map and ignore a lot of the lines and labels and things that are on there. You'll see a little red splot in the middle of the whole thing, and that's the technique I'm going to use because this marks Hitler's first major foray into the expansion that's going to become the basis of Lebensraum and expanding his Third Reich. What we have is a demilitarized zone in the Rhineland that was set up as, again, a part of the Versailles Treaty. And Hitler blatantly marches troops right into this demilitarized zone in 1936. Well, I mean, gee whiz, you got the greatest army in the world at the time, at least allegedly, the French. The British Army was fairly strong as well, and nobody does a thing. He moves in there and it's, okay, fine, we're not ready to do anything bad about this, so we'll let him move on in, and that's, of course, the start of whetting Hitler's appetite. In 1938, we move into Austria. Austria, of course, now part of the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, all carved up as a result of World War I, but a huge German population. Hitler alleges these people are being mistreated. These wonderful Aryan folks need to be brought into the greater protection of the Reich, and he marches into Germany claiming, thanks to Herr Goebbels and his marvelous propaganda machine, a 99.7% approval rating in Austria for this move. The next move is into the Sudetenland. 29th of September 1938, the Munich Agreement. Most of you have heard of Neville Chamberlain negotiating along with Daladier, the premier of the French Republic. They negotiate, okay, yeah, we understand your problem, a lot of Germans, persecution, etc., in this area of the new country of Czechoslovakia. And yeah, you move in there, but the promise is there's going to be no further annexations and peace in our time, as Chamberlain calls it. Well, that didn't last very long, and meanwhile there is an agreement with Poland and Hungary that, well, okay, let's get the rest of Czechoslovakia carved up, and the Poles, the Hungarians take their part, Czechoslovakia ceases to exist, but the French and the British still make no move toward overt war. Another thing, meanwhile, has been going on almost as a sidelight to this whole thing is General Franco institutes a revolution in Spain. He comes in from Morocco. They become two warring sides in an extraordinarily ugly civil war, the nationalists versus the Republicans. Franco's nationalists have Germany and Italy helping them out, surrogate powers, almost much like the Cold War that we experienced, where wars were done kind of on a surrogate basis. Meanwhile, the Republicans are being supported by the Soviets. So you have a lot of these new arms, tactics, and whatnot being tried out on the battlefields of Spain. Of course, in the end, Franco takes over, and that becomes a relatively neutral nation during the war, World War II. But one of the things tried out there is Hitler sends down a Luftwaffe outfit called the Legion Condor, and one of the most famous incidents is the bombing out of a town called Guernica. There's a picture of what it looked like. Well, this hits the world press. There are people like Ernest Hemingway, who is participating in the war and also as a famous writer. Photos and stories keep getting back into the rest of the civilized world. And wow, terror bombing. Well, was it terror bombing or was it a tactical move designed to further the war aims militarily of Franco's forces? You can see the debate coming up here. It becomes very apropos later on to the discussion about the atomic bombings.
And there were civilians were a lot of the targets.
Certainly
this,
civilians
right?
are the targets in any city, and this is going to become important in a moment here in the Battle of Britain, then in the bombing of the Reich, the bombing of Germany, and whatnot. Is a target purely civilian? Is it ever purely military?
Wasn't Guernica one of the first incidences where the world really came to know about civilians becoming arguably legitimate targets? Is that a fair statement?
The question is legitimacy.
Right, but in the minds of the attackers.
And it certainly is. And that's an important aspect of Guernica, raising the consciousness of, wow, this new weapon of war in the air, not the romanticized fighter conflict of World War I, but the, wow, strategic bombing as espoused by Douhet in Italy and Trenchard in the UK and Mitchell in the US. Right. Oh, this is actual in combat, and now people are starting to think about it.